All right. Looks like we are now live. Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to welcome Daza Greenwood today to talk about AI agents of all things. And thank you, Daza, for joining us today. Elena, my fellow attorney from New York and AI aficionado, was not able to join us due to some work conflicts, but hopefully we will carry on, and it's going to be an interesting discussion. Daza, would you please introduce yourself and tell our audiences who you are, what you have been doing recently, and just passing baton to you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on again. I think this is my my second appearance. I started not long after you launched this this amazing program, and I've been a long time listener since then. So I'm just thrilled to be back, and it's great to be talking with you again and your audience. So my name, as you said, is Daza Greenwood, and I run Civics.com, which is a consulting company that that works in the legal tech space. Mostly nowadays focused on generative AI. I also run a, let me see if I've got it. Yeah, here it is. I also run a research group at MIT called law.mit.edu. And we do got prototypes and some research convening and we have a publication, the MIT Computational Law Report, all of which you can see at that URL. But I'm not here representing MIT today, so I'll just wear my own company's hat. And I think the themes for me lately have been AI agents, which I know you'll want to be talking about, and also very importantly, evaluations. Like, how do we know when this generative AI stuff is working correctly, and how do we measure that? So those are sort of my two primary things that kind of keep me focused and up at night lately when I'm doing work stuff, at least.
Yeah, so when you and I were discussing how we want to structure this talk today, you suggested that we actually kind of jumped into benchmark and evaluations, just kind of straight on start talking about that. But I just wanted to ask you. I know, I think that you have been very enthusiastic about just AI agents. Kind of in general, right? I mean, there's a lot of criticism, but you're just kind of a proponent, I think, of this technology to the certain extent. And just maybe a few words, I mean, how you arrived to that mindset, right?
Sure.
Well,
I'd be happy to. And you're right that there has been some controversy or some criticism. And I think one thing to keep in mind here is for those of us who partake in the legal tech LinkedIn space, you just always have to take a get like a grain of salt and know that there's something about the culture in that specific space that is really prone to open with critique, open with doubt, open with risk, open with for some people doom. And so I don't know how representative that is, at least in the market that I'm seeing. There's a ton of investment right now. There's a ton of cost savings. There's a ton of revenue recognition for new sources as a result of this kind of technology. And also in sciences and in innovation space, the boost for ideation and creating novel solutions, all of this has been unleashed by the new wave of, I guess, what I call agent applications of generative AI. My own interest in this has been long-standing, and I think part of my enthusiasm now is based on having worked with prior generations of what we had called agents, dating back to believe it or not, the 1980s. I coded my first AI agent in 1980. Like 8 or something, I don't know, thereabouts. And it was in a computer science course, undergraduate. And we were creating implementations. It was a class project to create like a kind of clone of some kind, or our own implementation of something called Eliza, which was the first chatbot that came out of MIT. and it was a kind of a psychotherapist chatbot, and it was really popular and really blew people's minds that a computer could behave in a way that was, natural language and felt like talking to another human. And we wrote it in Lisp, which was a cool AI language, and or a language that was good for doing that kind of symbolic AI, and or not even symbolic. And anyway, and I've been kind of at it ever since, working in different agent-based simulations when I got over to MIT, and doing all sorts of things that were, I guess you could call it agentic in contracting. But when I was doing law practice and working with different technical teams doing high velocity contracts that were all, based on code in procurement and kind of value chains and supply chains. Also worked a little in high frequency trade. Those are agents. Those are contract agents that are creating transactions that are absolutely legally enforceable. And no human has like negotiated the contract or signed something. Like, it's all proxies happening through code and high velocity, network traffic. So, but I've always wanted to do more like human sorts of transactions with AI agents, because that's what science fiction promised us. I'd never seen it before. It's all just been ever more complex and higher grade deterministic code until the current generation of generative AI. So part of the reason I'm so enthusiastic about this is this new ingredient that's now available to kind of bake the dishes and the cakes of AI agents, have made possible capabilities that I and many of us have only dreamed of before, and now they can start to kind of approximate, and in some cases do better than how humans would approach different types of legal tasks and processes, including transactions and conversations and lots of interesting things. So I've just been having a really interesting time probing the shape of the new capabilities to see how far can we go, where is the ceiling, what is it not good at, and kind of just seeing like what is the nature and the kind of extent of the new capabilities that we have, and therefore what can we reliably put it toward. And I think I'm far from realizing what the full ceiling or the full capability space is. Obviously, there's some limits as well, and there's always new ways to overcome those limits at the same time, and that'll bring us to evals, which we'll get to later. But I hope that expresses some of my enthusiasm for the agent space. I like being able to extend my mind and my reach and my capability, and I like it when my clients can, and when my partners can, and when people across the economy and society can, and that's what this technology provides.
Yeah, that sounds, I mean, that sounds very appealing. I mean, I do have my doubts about AI agents. And when you mentioned ELIZA, I mean, I immediately thought about, other, technology that we have at the moment that has proven to be problematic, but we're not going there today. So just kind of switching back to what you have been recently doing and your research and your work, in terms of how to translate all this esoteric talk into like some measurable metrics and like benchmarks. And I mean, we are like, how do you evaluate all this amazing tech if you want to try it, and what kind of parameters will be put in place, and who are the stakeholders who will be actually making those decisions? So I just kind of wanted to start with, I know in your recent article that you put up there about benchmarks and evaluations, you kind of stressed the importance of who will be the people who actually will be defining this good quote unquote AI outputs. Is it leadership responsibility? Is it something that should be left to like technical folks, teams, vendors? So just kind of starting there, who are these people who will be making those types of decisions in terms of evaluation and definition, what's good and what's not in the AI output?
But if I may just go back for a moment, in the beginning of
Yeah, sure.
your kind of response there, you said that there's something about other technology, but we're not going to go there. And I don't know if I didn't hear what you were referring to, but I appreciate you said we're not going to go there, so we don't have to go there. But just what were you talking about? I didn't even catch the reference.
Yeah. So when you mentioned that you worked with ELIZA back in the 80s, which was like a, kind of quasi, I don't know, psychotherapy kind of an agent tool. something like that. So I was just, I just was referring to AI chatbots that we have these days, the teenagers and interacting with, for and yeah, we already have a few cases out there that are unfortunately tragic, but that's why, I said, there is also that aspect of that
Okay. Thank you
technology,
for
right?
clarifying.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
it
So
just
you're talking about
prompted
the
something in my mind when you mentioned Eliza, but
right.
we'll be talking about, yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah. Because there is a
Yeah.
let's return to AI agents after I talk about evals and I handle the question you were
Okay,
actually
sure. Yeah.
asking, because there's so
Hmm.
much to unpack there. And, even AI
Hmm.
agents is sort of like a mouthful. It's already kind of broken into, I don't know what, at least like 5 or 8 distinct, like basically non-overlapping kind of domains, one of which is these
Hmm.
chatbots and like AI girlfriends and therapists. And there's this whole genre kind of over here that has nothing to do with commercial transactions and nothing to
Exactly.
do with
Yeah,
internal
that's why I was
workflows,
trying to
nothing to
make
do.
that distinction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good distinction, and
Yeah.
it's a facet of AI agents that needs to be talked about, and it does have things to teach us in other domains as well.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, okay, let's go back. Let me give you the courtesy of answering the question you actually asked, and I'd be happy to return. I'm really happy to return
Hmm.
to AI agents later in the conversation if you would like
Hmm.
to. So the question, as I understood it, was who's going to be making the judgments about kind of what good looks like for these AI outputs, and that's a very you know I'm I'm I appreciate you asking the question that way because clearly you read my blog post where I go into
I
like my point
did.
of view
Uh,
on that exact
Preparing
topic.
for this talk for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so
And I've
I
been
have a
following you in
specific.
general. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and so yeah, I do
Hmm.
have a
Hmm.
specific like somewhat um I wouldn't call it controversial, but like a not not widely adopted point of view on that, and perhaps not widely adopted yet. And so my experience doing civics.com consulting stuff for different companies and groups has been with AI agents in particular, but other AI applications and services as well, that it's critical to be able to measure these things and to measure them in ways that are at least in part, different from how we'd measure any other application or service or a kind of platform capability where we like there's all kinds of quality metrics and unit tests and like there's all sorts of ways that we kind of measure things and those still apply. However, it was missing the something about like the AI ness of these applications, which needed to be assessed in other ways. And so there's this approach that is pretty well suited to at least one way to measure the AI aspect of these of these applications. And the way that people have probably heard about it is benchmarks. And so if you notice when a new model comes out, the company that put it out or the open source project team will usually accompany the press release and the model page with like lots of charts and graphs that show how they scored on different benchmarks, and they have benchmarks for coding and for math and for puzzle games and for being able to identify how many different people are there in an image, and there's like zillions of different benchmarks that test and measure different sorts of capabilities, and these are what I would call public benchmarks, and you can get the same a score on the same benchmark for 2 or 3 like different models because like they'll or more as to an arbitrary number of different models because they're using the same public rubric basically. And so that's good, but when you're now like working in a company with a product or with a like a specific internal workflow, you don't necessarily need to know these very generic kinds of things. They're somewhat useful to understand the kind of product or the kind of model capability space you have, but it's not specifically useful to know whether your product is working well for your customer under like those situations. And so there's this new wave of a kind of evaluation that is not generic and public, but it's actually very specific to the facts and circumstances of like that product and like these requirements and constraints and outcomes and how the product team and including sometimes like senior management or executives, what they are going like, what are the priorities of the company with respect to this? Like, what are they? Is it speed, or is it, is it like, is it, getting like the most efficient outcome, or is it like, verbosity, or is it like some quality? Like, we want to have like award-winning poems because we're a poetry creating thing. Like, these are completely different types of things that you're measuring depending on the context of what you're doing with your application. It turns out you can do evaluations on this stuff in a structured, programmatic, reproducible way, and then you could get similar outputs where you can sort of see, where you rated and ranked on these different measures. And so this is called custom evals or custom evaluations, but like evals for short. And so I've been doing a lot of that as part of my consulting work lately, because the people that are paying me to make these things or to augment their team or to do something or to battle test and red team it, whatever I'm doing, they always want to know, how do we know like how well it's doing? Like, how many units of good is it? Okay, well, that's a good question. Or when do we release? Like, is it good enough to release this to the public yet, or to release the next version? How do we diagnose what's going wrong? Like, it had been giving perfectly good answers. Now we're getting all these complaints from people. What's the root cause of this? And how do we know when we fixed it? You need to be able to run these sorts of tests to get to the bottom of that sort of stuff. And you can solve other challenges with evals as well. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And when you do custom evals, some of it is somewhat generic, like you want to count how many tokens, what the microsecond latency was, and there's some things like that where the technical team can do it. There's like libraries out there that everybody can use, so that's who makes the decision and the type of tools they use. There's other stuff that's uniquely the province of I'd say like the executives or the managers on the business side who are in charge of and responsible for that product or that service or that workflow. And especially when there's profit and loss, if there's P&L responsibility, it absolutely matters how their product is doing. That's how they're making money. And so it's a uniquely executive function to define what quality is, what good looks like, and what the standards are going to be. And now we have a way to express that in a measurable method and mechanism through evals. And so there's this fascinating new way that we can align generative AI with the interests and the priorities of organizations. And we can, and then that becomes a governance measure as well as a kind of product and quality measure. And so it's really interesting kind of like new tool we have like in our toolbox with respect to generative AI. So there you have it.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering, for example, for legal tasks, what kind of benchmark that would be, and I understand that might be kind of a broader question, depending who the customer is, right? So, is it like a, boutique law firm? Is it like in-house counsel? In-house legal department? Maybe it's a solo practitioner. So, I don't know if you had any experience, like any experiences, we can share something like how that would actually look like. Because let's say, I work in house, for example, I want to evaluate certain tools, or, AI agent, maybe, I don't know. So, how that would look like from your end, like on your end, when you're, you have this toolbox, you have this benchmarks, you have certain, criteria that you work with. So I was just wondering, if you could kind of talk about that a little bit, or maybe show us something. Share. I can stop sharing my screen. Although I do like the
it is really
the
nice.
Matrix code running. It's very relevant.
I know, like welcome to the Matrix.
Talk, but yeah.
Sure. So let me, if you don't mind, being a little bit more like playful with the answer to this, maybe we can co-create it together, and that might be educational for other people as well. So hey there. So as an in-house lawyer, let's say hypothetically, so you're just asking me hypothetically, like how would I do this for something? So the way that you answer a hypothetical is you got to get like a few more facts and circumstances, and then you could give an answer to that hypothetical. So we can make those facts and circumstances together in a way where you could almost answer the question yourself. And here's how we do it. So let's speculate for a moment together that you have you've just hired a new like assistant, junior counsel to augment you in your in-house counsel role. Okay. And they are performing tasks. And so my first question, and then you're asking me, how do I measure how this person's doing? Unfortunately, from when I used to be in-house counsel and then, did my time or punishment, it felt like sometimes as general counsel, like I've had to figure out how to measure how people are doing in-house. And I've got my own thoughts about that, but those thoughts aren't necessarily helpful or even relevant to you. Like I was in a certain kind of organization, we were doing certain kinds of things. So my question for you would be, what might a new hire in your organization be doing? That's like question number one. There's only 3 questions. Don't worry, it's not going to go all day. So help me speculate on what kind of tasks and processes would that hire be doing?
Well, I think I'm thinking about software company, right? So
Yeah.
where we have like a bunch of products, well, first of all, that person will have to understand what the products are, kind of study their architecture, and kind of work with engineering teams, product teams to just kind of learn about the technology. And because I've been in open source world for the past 15 years, so I found it really helpful when people start thinking about policies and processes and just kind of around different product lines, the licensing. So I'd probably task my junior colleague with studying their processes, just kind of looking what's out there in terms of the recent trends in the community for licensing, and things like that, and just kind of come up with sort of like a cheat sheet for every product, and just kind of thinking about which licenses would be acceptable, where we're looking at certain risks. And probably the same would apply if we wanted to do some like high level, AI regulatory framework research, right? So here's our products. So what are the possible issues that we might run into? And I'm thinking from like product counsel perspective, possible issues we might run into if we're going to, with this product. We're going to ship this product, make it available on the market, something like
Okay.
that.
So that's what you would. So you have a new hire, and you would task them. I guess perhaps I should have been more specific. Like when I say new hire, I guess I don't mean when they're doing orientation, but I mean like when you're putting them to work to do something to
Yeah.
augment your team. It would be. It would. I assume it wouldn't literally be like an introductory checklist of things for all of your products, or that sounds more like what kind of day in, day out work would you put as subordinate to work doing that you would take off your plate, for example?
I mean, as I said, I mean, I would task them. I mean, it kind of really depends, right? So how
Exactly.
how well versed the person is, right? But something that I would like to outsource, for example, is that let's say we have this new release, right? So it's kind of a better version yet.
Yeah.
It's not shipping. We're looking maybe next year or whatever. And I would ask that person just kind of get them started, to study the product and then list, you know, possible legal issues that we might be looking at down the road at this time, something like that.
Okay. So that is a common thing, and that's something that you do, I take it, yourself. Like you do like an
Mhm.
issue list and issue spotting for possible legal issues. Is that common for you for the product? That's something I would always do when we were thinking about new products.
Yeah, yeah.
So that is a task. Okay, good
Mhm.
task. All right.
Mhm.
So then the second question, and there's only 3, is this person comes back to you and they've got a list of 10 potential issues for a new product
Mhm.
that you have. And
Mhm.
there's like 3 torts that could happen. There's like, 4
Mhm.
like contract disputes. There's like a couple of
Mhm.
regulatory compliance issues, like, oh, we had some PII in there. So it's like, oh,
Ew.
we could have some. And so they got this like little list of like 10 issues. You
Mhm.
note that they completely missed, like
Mm.
several issues that you consider like absolutely huge, and
Mhm.
that the way that they talked about some of the issues was painfully naive, so you notice that, so you would mark it up, right? Like you would
Mhm.
have some way that you yourself, like Elisa, measured their output, and you would know what to look for so that you could like give them feedback on what they
Mm-hmm.
got right and what they got wrong, and so they could do a second version that would be closer to what you would need. It's like the essence of management, I think. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty much.
good. So I'm not even going to bother with a third question. I'll just like jump right in. So based on that little exercise we did of like a task that you would give a subordinate to do and how you would measure the outputs of what they did, that is the sort of like most rudimentary way to do evals for a custom
Mm-hmm.
eval set. And the way you do it, I'm going to kind of give you like the secret sauce now for at least this like level one method of evals. And it basically depends on you having kind of 3 columns in a spreadsheet would be the simplest way to do it, or you could do 3 objects in JSON. And so one of them is the input. And the input would be like, in this case, like give me, like spot the issues in this product. And then some description of the product, like whatever you would give that subordinate is what would be in that input. So you would attach these 3 documents, whatever, and the instruction. The second column would be the output. So this is the
Mm-hmm.
memo that they came back with, or this is the output from your AI agent or your AI application or your issue spotter. Issue spotter are us, vendor product that you've just invested in to do this, to fill this gap. That's what it actually said. And can you guess what the third column is?
I know what the third column is because I wanted to ask you about that. It's the expected, like anticipated
Exactly.
output, right?
Bravo.
Yes. Yeah,
You're the
yeah.
first person to answer that
Yeah.
correctly, by the way, who I'm not already working with. So
I did
you're
my
so great.
homework.
You were so great. Like you obviously read it and like you're so ready for this conversation. So that's totally it. And people, what's fascinating is like people when they haven't done it before have a hard time thinking. I had a hard time thinking what the third column was before I'd done the evals. The third column is you have to go before you do the test and think up what would be the OpenAI calls it the ideal answer. I call it the
Mm-hmm.
expected output, or they call it the ideal output. Other people call it the golden data. There's different
Yeah.
names for it, but it's basically like the I think of it like this. Like when I used to teach undergraduates, it had this rubric which I would give the grad students to grade their tests, and it would be like we're looking for these like 5 elements in their answer, and we want these things so that 10 different grad students would give the same grade to the same test, so they knew what to look for. Even if it was like a narrative test, like even if it was an essay, they would still grade it the same way. And so that's what you want to get. Like you want that grading rubric in the third
Mm-hmm.
column, maybe with an ideal answer or 2 or 3 ideal answers and describing, why these are good and what's not good, and would be a 100% versus 90% versus 80%. Then you can basically take that, row by row by row, input, expected output, 50 rows, 100, 1,000 rows, however many things you're going to be measuring, and you can do these evals in an automatic way in order to sort of see how your issue spotting agent is doing. And there may be several. And what's really interesting about this is it makes you think about how would I assess the answer of a person. And sometimes it can be hard because there's a lot of different ways to do a wrong answer. And I found that there's a lot of different ways to express a right answer as well. So one of the things I found with some of these companies is over time, they argue, like senior management will argue over what we want to test and how we want to test it and whether this answer is better than that answer, because it's a subjective value judgment. It's an executive judgment. And so there is literally not one right answer. And another general counsel might say they liked an answer that the subordinate gave that you didn't like. Well, that's fine. Like they can go work for the other person and be right. Like when they're working for you, this is how you're going to manage them. And so this is your domain of judgment. And so you can,
Mm-hmm.
that's why I say that this becomes an executive function, and it becomes the
Mm-hmm.
voice and the like the method and the mechanism by which organizations and management can govern their AI when you kind of do it this way. So that's anyway. So that's kind of my answer of like how
Mm-hmm.
to do it.
Yeah, so you mentioned in passing golden data. What exactly that is? How is it different from just like, your standard regular training data set or whatever it is? Just kind of wanted to unpack that a little bit, if you
It's
don't
real
mind.
similar. like, I don't know if you've seen training data, like, there's not, I think there's different ways to train depending on what
Mhm.
method you're doing or what part of the process you're in. But there's a lot of question and answer pairs in training data. Um, and so, this is a question and answer pair, is you could say, or it's a
Mm.
assignment, delivery pair, but it's like an input output pair, and so it's real similar. It's a radically different technical process going on. So when you're training a model, you're trying to optimize it so that you ultimately get the right weights and things, and it will like be able to if it works really well, it can generalize from that to a lot of things. And like it's a different task training a model than using a model at inference time to answer a question. And so that will subtly change it, but fundamentally it's the same kind of thing. It's basically a question answer pair.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so I know that we haven't really touched on this kind of AI agent or versus like agentic AI, but I wanted to ask you one thing. I like as AI agent kind of move beyond just like static outputs into this more of a multi-step decision process. Like, do you think we also need to evaluate not just the result, like the output, expected, anticipated, whatever, and the actual output, but also kind of the process itself? I don't know if that this question makes sense to you, but I think that as this technology becomes just more kind of complex, um, what do you think about that?
Hmm. Yeah, great question. So it, in my experience doing more
Mhm.
complex multi-agent systems
Mhm.
that span across kind of like interrelated spans of workflows, it's really necessary to not only do evaluations on the final result, but also to do evaluations, first of all, to get observability, and then to be able to do
Mhm.
evaluations on um, interim like checkpoints, almost not checkpoints, but interim, like junctures within the work.
Milestones.
Milestones
Yeah.
is the perfect word.
Mhm.
Sorry, I wasn't thinking
Yeah.
of the right word. That's the right word. And and then also not just milestones, but there's some things that go across milestones that are like long bubbling processes. Sometimes, like when they're
Mhm.
like a milestone, like a process could be based upon a search where you go out and like use a search API or something to get a
Mhm.
bunch of answers, and then you evaluate those answers or that research of like 10 different products that might answer the user's request, and then you synthesize it and then you put it into recommendations. That could be like four different processes, two of which could
Mhm.
be and you'd have to span across the first two milestones before you had the input to the analysis that we're going to do before we give the recommendation to the user. So there's some kind of evals that kind of go that span multiple milestones, if you want to put it that way. Or technically, I think of them as components almost, and but temporally, it's more like milestones. The weird thing with this stuff is depending on like there's some things where logically it's the first thing you would do, but it technically it might take twice as long. And so like these like it's not always temporal the way these things work. But anyway, when they're all done, you want to get logging, you want to get usable outputs from everything that happened that are capable of being inputs to an evaluation process. And so the real way to do so, the old way that I used to do it when I was just starting to make agent systems and I was kind of fumbling around, was just to use whatever like out of the box like Python logging thing that I had going for the system, or whatever the logging was, and I try to make it more verbose. And then I would just take that and then have to
Mhm.
parse it and figure out what was going on. And usually, whatever the logs were from different components and systems were sometimes very different. And it was like ended up being like a whole computer science project just to put
Mhm.
Humpty Dumpty together again and to be able to get like a full idea of what happened across these different components and processes. And so now the good way that I now know how to do, and that I'll share with you and your audience, is called open telemetry.
Mhm.
Open telemetry, one word, or OTEL for short, is what the kind of like file type is called. And this is a standard specification for kind of logging. And it's widely used in a lot of, especially industrial processes where you have to instrument across a lot of different, kind of systems. And it's being used now very heavily by the people that know what they're doing in agent space. And so the OpenTelemetry creates what's called traces, and the trace kind of spans the whole soup to nuts process from the very beginning to the very end. And traces are composed of spans, and you can calibrate these things in different ways and have them represent different things. But between a trace and spans and traces for each big thing that happened, you can get kind of everything you need. And so for an agent, for my like teaching agent project, when I'm like teaching teams how to build agents, I've got one that does like 5 or 6 like kind of standard processes, and I kind of show them how to get the OpenTelemetry from each one. I call it Agento, and it takes a user statement and it does ideation and then picks the best plan, and then revises the plan, and then kind of fills out the plan, and then kind of executes the plan. Those are like the basic modules, and I kind of show them how to get the telemetry from each, how to first of all get the final result, which you asked about. Came up with a result to see whether something went wrong there, or whether they missed something and the final result looked good, but it's actually not based on sound information, or whether there was something better in one of the drafts that never came up in the final result. And this final result could have been twice as good, but there was something hidden that it didn't surface. So you have to dig into, especially when things are going wrong and you're optimizing, there's no way to do it but from looking at the final result. You have to get the spans from inside it. But also when you want to find the highest value, you can discover the sort of like global optima, it's sometimes called, from looking at everything that happened and not be stuck at the local optima that finally came out the other end with the result. So it's a way to sort of increase value by taking advantage of all of the thinking and all of the resources that were accumulated across the entire life cycle of the agent. So therefore, in my experience, with more complex multi-agent, kind of multi-system systems of systems that create agent-based outputs, I like to look at everything that happens and have evals that measure different spans and different atomic milestones, and then look at the whole thing against what the original goal was, and then get a really full idea of what happened, and then sometimes be able to plumb more value out of it as opposed to the final result. Sorry, that was a little verbose, but I want to make sure people are familiar with these new terms and what these tools are and how to use them, what they mean.
Yeah, so open telemetry as in open source, proprietary open. I'm just kind of, I mean, what's the because it's not you said it's standards, it's a specification. So what's the status of that standard at this point, in terms of
It's
like
open.
it's
Yeah,
open.
it's very open. It's free to use, and it's good. Interestingly, there's some companies that have been like, since people in the generative AI space have been starting to embrace it, and especially agents, there's companies that have been adding to what used to be as far as I can tell from just reading through their email forums and all their old like chat logs and things, it was a good group and they were active, but it was somewhat sleepy and like off to the side. Now it's like red searing hot. So there's these groups that are like adding dialects to OpenTelemetry. So Arise has added something called Open Inference, which creates these more of a standard way to put attributes that are unique to generative AI, because that's the stuff that we're trying to measure. And the telecom people and the healthcare and like the factory automation people that had done this stuff before didn't have an idea of counting tokens, or like the specific things that we're trying to do with these APIs, or different agent processes exactly. And so they have these more particular ways so different teams can apply OpenTelemetry to this somewhat new space the same way. And then also the OpenTelemetry Consortium has got something called semantic conventions, they call it. Semantic conventions sort of like their own way to standardize specific weird attributes that otherwise people like me were just making up our own terminology, which is kind of not what
Yeah.
you want for a standard.
Yeah, 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 definitely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I didn't know about this one. I will definitely look it up, and after our talk, I will try to post the URL for folks who are really interested and want to nerd it out a little bit. But when this whole AI thing started, because I've been in open source for a very long time, and I've seen that kind of evolution of standards, how ISO standards kind of plugged into that, like open source compliance and everything. So I was thinking, this is interesting. um I thought that made a lot of sense, that some of those standards, or maybe the new standards, as we saw over the last couple of years, kind of emerge, so that folks could have that framework, right, to even work with and kind of speak the same language, like how to, in terms of like process, quality management, things like that. So yeah, that makes sense to me, what you have just described. So I will definitely look it up. It's kind of interesting.
Highly
So
recommended.
that,
Yeah, my life has gotten a
yeah.
lot better since I started using OpenTelemetry.
Okay, gotcha. Well, that's good to hear. We still have some time. If you don't mind, I also wanted to touch on, just because I did promise our audience that we'll discuss the AI agent use case in kind of a transactional realm. And I know that you have been researching that as well, and you wrote quite a bit about that. So, you know how folks always say, we need this new laws and regulations, and these are novel legal issues that we haven't tackled before. But I think you argued in your work and your paper that we actually have certain existing legal frameworks that kind of anticipated the autonomous agent transactions, things like that. So I wanted to switch our conversation to that domain, if you don't mind, and just kind of speak a little bit about that. What kind of legal regulatory foundations we have at this time that can actually be applied to, like, agents, automated transactions, and things like that. Because after that, we will go into the whole agency thing, right? From like going back to law school perspective. But I wanted to set up a stage for that, if you don't mind.
I
If you
don't
can
mind.
tell us a little
No,
bit about that. Yeah.
yeah, I'm in both feet. Let's do this. So,
Yeah.
okay. Yes, as it turns out, surprisingly to many people, there is an existing AI agent, or like software agent, autonomous software agent, legal framework out there, and it's shocking.
Shocking.
It is shocking. Like, and I talk to lawyers, I won't mention the companies, but like companies we've all heard of that give us the magical frontier models that we now use, and at least I love them. But and yet they don't know about this. And I think it's partly because a lot of the people that are, like doing stuff now were, it's not that they weren't born yet, but like they were like in elementary school, like when these things happen. So like they just literally don't know. Like nobody mentioned in law school that we have or they didn't mention these sections of things in the United States, such as the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act.
That one.
Which is uniform state law, and everybody in the U.S. has heard of the Uniform Commercial Code, and like we have to learn that in law school. But there's other ones that I don't think have, like, I think have sort of disappeared from curricula and from everyday parlance, and yet they are law. And if you look at the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act and kind of scroll down, you'll see that there's definitions of agents, software agents that can autonomously complete transactions without human review or approval. That sounds right on point to me. And provisions for automated transactions, which are conducted
Yeah.
by like maybe an agent on one side and a human on the other, or agents on both sides, and what the rules are that apply. There's also provisions in this uniform law for what happens when there's errors and mistakes that are introduced by the agents, and kind of who bears the risk of loss, and how to mitigate or avoid being legally responsible for the loss, like how to shift that. And so there's rules for all that, and lots more. that that you can learn about if you go to dazagreenwood.com. Like I've just, as a public service, sort of like dusted off these old chestnuts and beautiful legal frameworks and explain them and put links to them so that you can just quickly backfill this essential knowledge. And there are, I think it doesn't go without saying that 90 something, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9% of what's going on with when we use generative AI and when we use agents, just normal law still applies. So, like unfair and deceptive trade practices, product liability, like these, it's not like the existing legal frameworks no longer apply. They totally apply. And you can usually get a predicted legal result just from applying normal law to the situation, period. And there's some edge cases where we've kind of confounded things by having these like thinking machines in the middle. And then you might want to look to these more specific frameworks. So that, I think, was what you were getting at by the question. But if it wasn't, you can maybe just steer me the right direction and I'll go there.
No, this is exactly what I wanted to touch on, because next I just wanted us to just refresh, I guess, our kind of understanding of what you call the triangle of agency, right? Principal, agents, third party. So like how fiduciary duties apply in this, in the agent-based transactions. Because I think what people are asking is like, there is this technology, it makes certain decisions. I mean, I give instructions, what happens? Like, how do we frame that? It feels like it's kind of a no-brainer, but at the same time, I feel like it's not really clear to many people what's actually happening when in that kind of, your classical like agency, situation, right? When your agent is not a human, but a thinking machine, as you called it very elegantly.
Right. Yeah. How do I do screen share?
So basically, there's a little plus at the bottom of the screen, if you can see it. If you hover over it, it says present.
Slides,
It's
video,
like a
image.
screen,
Oh, screen share.
Screen. Yeah.
Okay.
Here we go.
Share screen.
Yeah.
How's it look? Can you see loyalty by design?
Adding that to the stage. Here we go.
Great.
It's up.
Great. So, gosh, about almost a year ago now, with Consumer Reports Innovation Lab, who's very interested in opportunities, but also potential risks for consumers who are using AI agents to conduct transactions for them. We collaborated on doing some like initial sense making of agents, and we looked at some other areas of law, especially like the rules of agency, because at first blush, a lot of people think, oh, it's an agent, so it's probably like a legal agent, right? And therefore we would apply the rules of agency to figure out what the legal outcomes will be. And actually, that's totally what you don't do. And the reason you don't do that is because the rules of agency assume that you have legal entity as an agent, and a legal entity is the principal, and a legal entity is the third party. And if you don't have a legal entity as the agent, like a human being or a company that can, form contracts and can sue and be sued, and can make decisions, can consent to things, and can so forth, then this just doesn't apply. And it shouldn't apply because it assumes a lot of capabilities that fall apart when you're dealing with a much more limited machine. And as great as generative AI is, it's not up to the task of substituting for a human in so many ways, and this is one of them. But here's like another way to look at things, which is, I think, helpful. Which is, let's say you've got a principal, like in principal, agent, third party, like principal law. That body of law can still apply if the principal, who let's say is a consumer, and we're in the context now of using an AI agent to conduct a transaction. So like uniform electronic transactions kind of land that I was talking about, or like buy a product, which Perplexity and OpenAI and Stripe and everybody's doing nowadays. If the user is using an AI agent system that they didn't create, but that was being provided to them by an AI agent like system provider, Now you have a legal party. And
Mm-hmm.
so this part, you can call that like I would call that an agentic system. And the system is composed of an AI agent, which is, you can think of that like the toaster, or like, like a piece of software. And
Yeah.
then a trust, and then the entity, which hopefully is trusted. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's being, the user is trusting them to give them something that will conduct a transaction with
Mm-hmm.
a third party. So between the enabling technology that's being provided by the legal entity, that's the kind of AI agent provider, you can now apply agency law and get something kind of like closer to a coherent
Mm-hmm.
um, framework that people want to do with the AI agent alone. I kind of call this the iron triangle. And one of the things that's kind of cool about it is that you can, here we go, I'm back. You can now start to imagine when you have AI agents that are being trusted with like money by a user. So like you can buy a product for me. That's being trusted with money of a user. It's like literally what's happening here. And now there's something at stake, and it starts looking a lot more like the kinds of relationships the law um, will impose sometimes a fiduciary relationship on the
Mm-hmm.
entity that had the power to and that required the trust of the user in order to conduct their transactions on their behalf, like they're holding your money for you, they're holding your property, and so it to not be exploited. We have these fiduciary duties, which is part
Mm-hmm.
of agency law, where the
That's right.
agent is not just an agent, they're a fiduciary with additional duties.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
one of those duties is the duty of loyalty. And
Yes.
so the fiduciary duty of loyalty is a
Rings a bell.
really rich
Mm-hmm.
well to apply to AI agents conducting transactions on behalf of
Mm-hmm.
users with third parties, because that literally ensures alignment with the interests of the user. This is the
Mm-hmm.
holy grail that we've always been
Mm-hmm.
after with generative AI. Is we want alignment. Alignment's
Mm-hmm.
good. Sometimes it gets a little weird, doomer-like, and theoretical for my taste, but
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't make it meaningless or useless. It's actually also quite good in a very practical, day in, day out transactional grind, as something we can take a narrow engineerable slice of and apply to the providers of AI agent systems, to make sure there's alignment with the best interests of their users when they're conducting transactions on their behalf and spending their money. And this is something we can measure. Like if you're going to be a lawyer in the
Mm-hmm.
United States, you have to take an ethics exam that shows that you know how to be a fiduciary and how to put like the money in escrow and not use it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a bunch of
Yeah.
things we can test 50 ways,
Mm-hmm.
and we can test these things in evals with with AI agent systems to make sure they're up to the task and they're being loyal. And that's how it all comes together.
Yeah, and that's how we're circling back to where we started, right? So do you think, I mean, we talked about the legislation and kind of this agency framework that we have. Like, what do you think are the gaps, with this existing framework, if there are any, if we apply them to this modern AI agent behavior? So what were your thoughts on that? Because it looks like we're kind of covered, but again.
I'm going to put a new hat on.
All right. Human. Oh, yes. Okay. Gotcha.
I just got this hat
What
yesterday.
is it? This phrase has been used widely. I would call it the buzz phrase at this point. What exactly does it mean? Because it really depends. Like I work in the software company, right? So we have the human in the loop requirement for whatever, like, AI generated code, all of those things, right? So here, in the AI agent, kind of a legal task, performing legal tasks, all this beauty. What does it mean? Is it
What indeed?
somebody like an oracle, again with the
Maybe.
matrix reference,
Yeah.
sitting there and just basically like, you know, telling folks? There is no spoon. Have a cookie.
There is no spoon, yeah, and bending the spoon with your mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, or spoon feeding you, bit by bit what you need to
Wolf
know.
wasn't even a human. It was not a human.
I know that's the real irony, But the
I
little
know,
boy
right?
was human who
Yeah.
said there's no spoon, or was he human? Who knows in the Matrix?
She
Anyway,
was not.
oh, he wasn't. Oh, that's right. Yeah, because then we just
She was not.
anyhow,
I mean, there are so many references in that movie. It's crazy.
it is crazy.
It's
It's
been
deep.
25 years and I'm still thinking about it. But yeah,
Same.
going back to our question, what does it mean?
Sorry. So, well, I think it means different things to different people. And when you say it's a buzzword, I think you're right. And I'm in the United States where it has even more ambiguous meaning than where at least there's a statutory framework in the AI Act that brings it up in a couple different places, as I understand it. And there's kind of, and even there, like there's this great blog post, by the way, by Catalina, I think it's Hernandez. I don't know if she's out of Spain. She's new and she's great. She's really interesting young lawyer, and she just wrote a blog post about how some of what it should mean, although it isn't statutory, it's not part of the regulation, is it should mean that when you have a human that's overseeing what algorithmic decision making is for humans, even if it's only failing 1% of the time or 1/100th% of the time, which is when they should be able to intervene and change something, that the 99% of the time, part of the function of the role of the human in the loop is to just have compassion and to be like a human to the other people going through these like mechanical processes, like a TSA agent looking at a machine and just like, hi, like I've got you, like, yeah, I'll hold your bag, or like, yeah, your child can come through first and hold their hand until the mom comes through. Like, just be a human being with other human beings going through increasingly mechanical processes. I'm not wearing the hat, however, because I feel like I know what human in the loop is. I don't. I'm wearing it because of to answer your question about what's different with these processes. And so what's different right now, I think not enough is different. So that I can't think of any reason why existing legal frameworks and statutes and regs and practices can't be creatively applied to answer every case that's going to come up with in October 9th, 2025 with AI agents. Ooh, I'm going to have to get off in 3 minutes, by the way. I've got another thing.
We're almost out of time, but yeah, we're wrapping up. I think on an interesting note. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. But just over the horizon, perhaps, it's hard to say how far things are over the horizon, but I sense coming closer is going to be a time when these AI agents are less like agentic processes or workflows where everything's kind of the sequence of things and the shape of the outputs is quite known in advance, and we can do golden data on it, and like we kind of know what the context and the kind of shape of the outcome is supposed to be, but where these things become more and more autonomous. And the more autonomous, the more autonomy you imbue in these systems, the broader the range of potential things they can do becomes. And so there's this the way I think about these systems is like right now when I build AI systems, they've got very short leash. Like if it was like a dog or something, it would be like a short leash and like a
arm's length,
like maybe arm's length, and like a big harness that goes around there, probably has like a muzzle, a thing so it can't bite people. Like they're very controlled systems because I'm a somewhat risk averse, I guess, even though I do push the envelope. And then there's some people I work with where they have a much longer leash and they're comfortable with that, but it's still a leash. Like you can draw a radius of like what it can do and what it just can't do. Some of that's by design, some of it's because the technology is not capable of doing a lot of stuff. And then but the GPT-6 is coming. It's cooking right now, and a version of it's already won the Math Olympiad. So like the reasoning is going to be off the hook. And then when you extrapolate that to that reasoning, it's a general model. So it'll be able to do that level of reasoning for law and for finance and for relationships and everything else. So it's coming. People, and same with Gemini 3 and so forth. So in the pipeline, we've got models that that will be capable of a great deal more autonomy. I think that's what's going to test our existing legal frameworks. We'll have to start thinking about, what would be the right framework. For me, it's premature to do too much thinking about that, even though I know doomers and other people love to, and I'll do it, like over beers, informally. But I will want to wait and see what the technology can actually do before being too specific about what legal frameworks would be an appropriate and proportional fit to that. I think that's the right time to do it. Because the thing I most don't want to do is stifle what could be awesome technology. Like, I want that technology, and then we can make it like perfectly safe. I don't want to like strangle it in the crib in case it's bad later.
Strangle in the crib. Wow, that's a really good metaphor, and I need to remember it. So basically, yes. So basically,
I'm so American. Forgive me. I'm super.
No, this is great. I mean, I'm always learning. Like, I'm collecting those things. It's like, because this is not something that would teach you in like ESL class or something. So because English is not my native tongue, right? So, yeah. Well, Daza, thank you so much. It's been so much fun. I'll try to, by the way, Daza also runs the Legal Hackers meetup.
With Diana Stern.
Like different places, San Francisco, Oakland, like cool places like North Beach and stuff like that. That's how I think we met in person for the first time.
That's right. Yeah.
So yeah. So thank you so much. And I'll continue follow your stuff. It's really interesting. I'll post some link for folks for reference, the stuff that we discussed today. And yeah.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much for letting me be on your show again and for having the opportunity to talk with you more. I hope we can do it again.
Thank you so much, Daza. Bye-bye.